Else
Realm
realm
Diners.
Hello, I'm Mark,
And I'm Ruth.
and welcome to the Else Realm Diner. It came from the swirling depths of the multiverse, a sentient cafe, a cosmic mystery, transporting its clientele through all manner of realms. No one knows where the diner came from. All we know is that it seeks interesting conversation, warm memories, and good banter.
On the menu today is Avatar, and it's recently released, rather anticipated by some and unanticipated by some,
Yeah.
sequel, Way of the Water.
Mm-hmm.
Way
Yeah.
of Water.
Way of water.
Not Way of the Water,
Yeah.
just water.
Water.
Yep. So, shall we start with James Cameron?
Yep.
And
Jimmy Cambo.
yeah, so if we talk about his entire movie catalogue, and just maybe briefly go into that a little bit. So, I mean,
Oh, so I thought you were going to say if we talk about his entire movie catalogue, we'll be here all day. But no, okay, okay, go on.
no, I was gonna mention them because, like, considerably, a big percentage of them
Yeah.
are, big,
Big movies.
big, successful, you know, impressive, future defying movies. So
Yeah.
we'll gloss over his first movie, which was Piranha 2. No. Yeah, no, I think it was Piranha 2, the flying fish thing,
Yeah.
which was actually a very well made movie. It was just rather rubbish. And then we get
Well, the thing is,
sorry.
it's hardly a surprise in so much as he had his initial start in films was as an artist and fabricator, wasn't it, on different projects?
Yeah, and he started in a studio that was there was quite a lot of people came out of the same studio,
Was
but
it
they
Stan
were all
Winston
kind of,
Studios?
I don't know, might have been, I'm not sure.
He certainly worked closely with Stan Winston, obviously on Terminator. But with with that in mind, I mean, one of the earliest memories I have of understanding Cameron's full background was I remember seeing a still from behind the scenes of the second Conan movie, Conan the Destroyer, I think, where he was painting a cityscape onto glass so that they could sort of, using forced perspective, have a camera filming through the glass at a mountainscape and have the heroes approaching the mountain, which was also therefore approaching the city on the mountain, without having to build a city on a mountain. So he was special effects. He was
Yeah, no, and he did the similar kind of thing in some of the stuff where he did forced perspective work on the Aliens movie,
Yeah.
where he fooled some of the people, going, I thought we were doing forced perspective and not building these huge sets, and he's like, yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, that's what we did. Exactly. And so in that sense, he understands the craft. He clearly was a very talented artist himself, and out of that presumably came this deep interest in how you can use the camera to tell stories. So for example, one of my favorite sort of tricks that he ever did as a director that I'm aware of was in Aliens, when they had to get a shot of a facehugger coming across the floor in the med bay towards Ripley and Newt, and they couldn't quite figure out how they were going to do it. It was a puppet. They had rainfall. Well, not rain. They had fire suppression going off in the room because Ripley had put a lighter to one of the sensors to try and get people's attention.
So it was rain. Well, it was water, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's sort of water falling. Yeah, sprinklers had gone off.
Yeah,
and they weren't quite sure how to make this happen, and they were trying to get it to go forward, and he said, "Look, let's just do this really simply. Have it start in its end position, so it was going to jump onto a chair or something, and then we'll pull it back with a string." and we'll just play it in reverse. And people are like, that won't work. The water's falling vertically from top to bottom in the frame. And he goes, no, it'll work because all people will see is visual noise. It'll be fine. And it works. Even
Yeah.
quite a few times I've tried to literally think of that shot as being backwards when watching it, and you're so invested in the action, you're so caught up in the frenetic movement of this creature that it works. And so in that sense,
Yeah.
he's always had an interest in. I suppose you could call it trickery, but also I guess you could call it the magic of movies and their ability to tell stories that otherwise would not be filmable.
Yeah, I very funnily watched an interview that he was giving where he picked up a magazine because it had said tricks to do exposition well in your movie.
Yeah, no, in
And
part, no, and also writing difficult sequels, wasn't it? It was, yeah,
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 and so he picked up this magazine and he was reading it and he was like, oh, because it turned out it was about the exposition one was about doing it like the Terminator, which
yeah,
obviously he wrote
yeah.
and directed. So he was like, I can't
Oh,
learn from
oh.
myself.
No, exactly, yeah, and I think it was the Hollywood Writers Guild or something magazine.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, and he was
so
like, "Fuck's sake," and sort of chucked it
yeah.
on the floor. Yeah,
But
and
I
he was,
mean, I mean, this is the thing with Cameron's work. I mean, he tends to go massively over budget, doesn't he? Massively over time.
mm-hmm.
He obviously strives for a level of perfection that makes him at points difficult to work with.
Well, that is one of the downsides. Reportedly, he in professional relationships is a perfectionist, but also can be quite forcefully demanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
mean, the thing is, I think like the guy is a genius, isn't
Mm-hmm.
he?
Mm-hmm.
He did Titanic, Terminator, Terminator 2, which at the time was just, I mean, the world had seen nothing like it. And that globby silver goo stuff
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
still something that gets used today in a contemporary setting. And I mean, that movie's over 20 years old.
Yeah.
The he's Titanic topped the box office, Terminator 2. So he knocks himself off, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's really on a race against himself to beat his previous work. I mean, his stories capture the minds of people. I mean, he's written action movies with female leads when people at a time when people said nobody would want to watch it if it had a female lead, and he's created Sarah Connor.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
from the mind of Jim Cameron came Sarah Connor, who is one of my genuinely favorite characters of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think he's a genius. And then he gave us I mean, the Abyss was a bit like it's okay. I mean, it's a good movie. Like, it's a really good movie. It's just not top of the game. But I mean, and if you think about the impression that the Terminators had on popular culture,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it permeates everything, doesn't it?
It does, and in that sense, it feels like a bad idea to bet against Cameron.
Yeah.
Because even some of the stuff that he's tangentially involved with, for example, one of my favorite sci-fi movies, certainly my favorite manga live-action adaptation, um, Alita Battle Angel, was
Yeah,
a
that was
project.
good.
Well, was a passion project of his that he bought the script, well, the rights for, I think in the 80s or something, and he just didn't have time because he was working on Avatar, so he basically gave it to Robert Rodriguez as a directing project. And apparently, the two of them are determined to see part two come out, which would be fantastic.
I mean, I really did enjoy that. I thought
Mm.
visually it was really interesting, but also I was a bit like, but I mean, he also backed Dark Fate.
Well, no, well, hang on,
So
hang on,
I
well, hang on,
don't
hang on, hang on.
no,
Finish that thought. You were a bit like what?
I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
I didn't like love it to the point of getting excited and anticipating a sequel. And I kind of was half interested to find out where it could go,
Hmm.
but I wasn't in love with it, if that makes sense. But I did enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And also in that sense, I just I just like the manga that it's based on as well. So,
Yeah.
um, but the point is yeah, he also tangentially was attached to Terminator Dark Fate, as you say, and that one for me was the biggest red flag disappointment I've had in his entire career. Now, admittedly,
Well,
he didn't direct the thing, um, but I know I've talked to you about this in the past, but I think it's worthwhile reiterating here that I was so disappointed by that because uh, they specifically did a 2 hour press conference. Him and Tim Miller, the director, who'd just come off Deadpool, I think Tim Miller had. He'd just been let go
yeah.
from Deadpool 2 due to creative differences, and Cameron was talking about how they was wanted to make possibly three really kick-ass movies. They had a three-story arc in mind. They'd been in a writer's room for 18 months or something at that point, coming up with variations on what Terminators might be able to do in modern times. And and it was exciting because the rights for this franchise, the Terminator franchise, were reverting back to Cameron. So he could, if he wanted to, he
Yeah.
could direct another movie, but he was giving this over to Tim Miller, who was a hot property at the time.
And yeah, he was definitely backing, wasn't he? Forcefully
Yeah, yeah,
backing. And it was a reset back to, to get rid of 3, 4, 5.
yeah,
Was
Genesis,
there a 5?
etc. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've sort of lost count, but and also as well, they weren't shy about mocking those movies. They were like, well, actually, some of them were okay, some of them were terrible, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
they were ballsy, they were brash, they were confident, and then it ended up being a bit of a disappointment because obviously you and I went to see it, if not on release night, certainly very soon after it came out,
I
and
think it was released night.
yeah, and I think by then I'd started to hear people going,
And I was still hopeful. I was
yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
James Cameron says.
yeah,
And if James Cameron says, it must be true.
he's our Lord and Savior. And we went in, and because I was expecting it to disappoint me, it didn't disappoint me quite as badly.
Oh,
But
I
you
was
were quite
gutted.
gutted. Yeah,
I was literally like, oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's just
Well,
so disappointing. But then this is my new theory about James Cameron is like, you can't trust his backed thing, what the things he backs. You can only trust the things he does.
hmm,
But I'm seeing a trend at the moment with James Cameron, which
mm-hmm,
I think started with Avatar, which is where he says, I've got 3 or 4 or 5 movies in the bank here,
yeah,
and maybe the first 1, 2, or 3 are going to be okay, but the last one is going to be amazing.
yeah,
And
mm-hmm,
that's kind of what he did with Dark Fate. It's like, we've got this 3-movie thing.
yeah.
It's going to be great. And it's like, don't give us great 3 movies down the line.
No,
Put it
no,
in the first one.
yeah.
Do it already.
And just to be clear, I think for me, Dark Fate failed because it didn't. First of all, it didn't quite know what tone it was going for. In so much as it was trying to bring in a little bit of the Terminator 2 humor, it was trying to bring a little bit of the Terminator Salvation seriousness. It was trying
And
to
it
make
rammed feminism down your throat in a way that didn't need to be done if
well,
you have strong female characters.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, in that sense, talking about how literally
I'm
having,
not just the mother of the savior.
yeah, exactly,
I
yeah, yeah,
am the savior myself. And it's like,
yeah,
whatever. John Connor was rubbish.
yeah,
Sarah was da bomb.
yeah, yeah, and in that sense, yeah, and that's the thing. The reason why I wanted just to make it clear is that for me, that film didn't fail in the first few minutes as it did for so many apparent Terminator fans, where Arnie comes in and, well, a facsimile of Arnie comes in and shoots
Oh, Bob.
Connor.
Well, yeah, no, that didn't fail for me. Although I
No,
was just like,
but it was what they
well,
did with that. Because you go, okay, interesting. This is a time travel sci-fi universe, and frankly, the loop has to be broken. Because at this time, how many times can we save John Connor? Um, but then they not only had that weird sort of really in your face kind of like I'm more than a womb kind of thing, but also as well there was this element of okay, right, we're gonna change. Skynet is no longer the thing; it's a different bad guy. I forgot what it was called now. The
oh yeah, I don't
computer.
care either.
Then also the Terminators became these sort of splodgy kind of weird, like almost like Matrix squid things in the future. It all started to feel actually like sci-fi that's been influenced by Terminator for the past
Yeah,
20, 30 years, as opposed to something that was truly groundbreaking. And one of the areas where it truly lost me was when it just completely squandered simple things like the fact that these days we have drones, we have internet tracking capabilities, we have
yeah.
triangulation and photogrammetry, all sorts of stuff that could be done, frankly, with the phone in your pocket or with a webcam, or the a
And
truly
yeah, then there's even this thing where they're like special futury stuff, and I'm
yeah
like,
yeah
oh my god, did Joss Whedon just walk in the room? No,
exactly no
stop it.
precisely, and they could have really. I mean, in that Hollywood Reporter press conference, they were talking about how they wanted to go back to basics with the premise, because he said Cameron said that they've been talking to futurists, people who are who are talking about AI, for example, in particular, and what the dangers of AI are potentially. And I thought, oh great, okay, cool. So we're going to have really clever, really sort of manipulative uses of AI in our everyday lives. The fact that we even live in a time when we have the internet of stuff, of things. Your fridge can be connected to the internet. There is
Yeah,
so much potential for just highlighting those central themes, those core themes of one day the machines are going to rise and take over. And instead, what we got was what felt a bit like a cartoon rehash of some
mm.
ideas from some of the other Terminator movies, and it was
And
it
the
was a shame.
problem was as well, it felt like a setup movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what is he playing at? Stop giving us setup movies, Cameron. Give us
Mm,
the movie. Anyway, like the other thing I wanted to say as well is like I got really annoyed at reading some of the like Linda Hamilton did a load of interviews, and obviously she's been off the scene for a long time, and it was
yeah.
lovely to see her like in doing the rounds and stuff and promoting the movie.
Hmm.
But she also told me along, not me, which told the
She told
world.
you.
I know I felt like I was in a conversation. It was so intimate, but no. She was saying somewhere, probably the Graham Norton show, but they apparently they padded out her bum
Oh,
to make her look more like bootylicious, and I was like, "Fuck you,
yeah,
no, just
no.
let her have the bum she had. She had a fine figure. Like,
But
stop
also,
building on ridiculous qualities of beauty that women are supposed to achieve."
yeah, but also as well, she's in the movie. She's meant to be a bitter, basically semi-functioning alcoholic. Like, you're not gonna have a bootylicious
Well,
behind.
no, but also I'm like, she was not like built like that in the
No,
second one, was she? Like when
no.
she was all like buffed
She was
up and
lean.
stuff,
Yeah.
she was lean and it sort of I was just like, butt pads?
Mm,
Really?
yeah.
No.
Mm.
Unhappiness personified.
And
So
so, so
well,
Cameron,
maybe we should also mention Titanic as well, though, because that was the
yeah,
movie he beat with Avatar, wasn't it?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, Titanic. I actually went to see that in the cinema. With
I saw it 5 times in the cinema.
wow, 5 times, cranky.
Yeah, I was young, and at the age when Leo DiCaprio was just like a god amongst men, and I was just like, all me and my friends were like, "Oh my god, we've got to go and see Leo Dio."
Leo Dio.
Leo Dio.
Oh my god. Um,
It's like in insert teenage girl crush mode.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because he'd just been in Romeo and Juliet,
Oh,
and
okay,
then he
yeah,
got into this next romance,
yeah.
and we were all just like, oh, and I just went to see him 5 times. I was like, I'm gonna make the box office for this movie.
Okay. Well, I would have been what 13, 14, I think,
Yeah.
going into Titanic, and um, I have to say I didn't mind Kate Winslet posing naked. That was interesting, but but beyond
Well,
that,
James Cameron drew the picture of her.
did he?
Yeah,
Oh,
so the picture where you see
yeah, yeah.
the
Jack's
Leo
hand.
drawing and
Yeah,
the like the flick of the hair as he's like blows it
yeah,
back up.
yeah.
That's all James Cameron's hand.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah, so he just sat down and chiseled that out.
fair enough. I guess if
Yeah,
you've got a
he's brilliant,
if you yeah you've got
multi-talented.
the
And
skill and the talent.
then he became the world leading expert, didn't he, in deep sea marina trench diving submarines.
Yeah, no, he did, yeah, or partly in and around the passion for filming Titanic, but also
Yeah,
he had actually gone away and become a bit of a deep sea geek and a Titanic geek before he thought to make the film. The film basically, he'd made so much money in his life he could just have spent the next the rest of his life being a deep sea explorer, but he decided to make Titanic. But anyway, so the point is, so I went in an impressionable teenager, and I was so struck by a couple of things in that film. No, but no, I was struck by first of all, yeah, the scale, the scope of the storytelling, but also the relationship between a big story and the little story. I very much
yeah,
appreciated the way that he found a way to tell the story of the Titanic using this fictional couple. And yes, there were some missteps. He portrayed certain characters as being cowardly and or suicidal, which, as far as we can tell, they weren't. He did use, as far as I can tell, real, genuine observations as to what different people said on the night. Things like hearing one person saying to the captain, three compartments are now full as they pass a certain point in the ship. That's actually stuff that really did happen. So
yeah.
that
And
was quite
actually,
cool.
a lot of the background stuff he meticulously went through photographs
Yeah,
of things and artifacts from the Titanic and recreated those in the backdrop.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and
so
to the extent where they were making guesses as to what might have been in the first class saloons
yeah.
that they then confirmed on diving. They were like, I bet there's going to be one of these clocks on that mantelpiece. They went down, had a look, moved something out of the way, and there it was. It's like, yes. so so again, the design aesthetic was there, and actually in that sense, the movie brought this massive story to you in a way that also felt really fresh. For me, the best part of Titanic isn't just the scope of the destruction, but it's also actually the feeling you get when you're looking at the ship new. You had a
mm,
sense of this is what it's like to be in the early 1900s, looking at this amazing achievement, and that was obviously echoed, therefore, in the movie itself. It was an amazing achievement itself, and it went on to be for a long time
but
the
it's
highest
also
grossing
like
movie of all
it's
time.
also told as like this thing of hubris, isn't it? Like
Hmm.
this parable. Is it parable?
Yeah,
Moral
parable.
tale?
Yeah, parable.
Yeah, of hubris, of like, it's kind of the same story as the Tower of Babel, isn't it?
Hmm.
Where you
Hmm.
you try and say something is, you know, unsinkable,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're going to achieve godlike status in
I dare
this.
you, but nature,
Yeah.
try your
And
best.
I think you're right. I think the story there, and again, I think this is something we're going to come back to with Avatar, actually, is that idea of a big story being this crisis of this ship sinking and this slap in your face to human arrogance
Hmm.
of, this is the best thing ever.
Hmm.
um and I do like how he manages to, you even get a sense of the side characters, don't you? Like that lady, and there's a couple that kind of just go curl up in bed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a woman who's speaking to her children, telling them a story,
Mm-hmm.
trying, because they know they're not going to get out. There was the horrendousness of the class divide, which is expertly told, because you have Rose standing on the upper class side and Jack on the lower class side, and so you have that divide absolutely thrown in your face in a way because you're invested with those two characters and their story. And I think that's, and I think he did the same thing in like Terminator. The big story is the future's coming to get you in the now.
Mm-hmm.
And the little story is a woman is running for her life and has this romance with this man, and I think that is something that I think it's the little character pulling in that makes you invested and allows for that big story's message, tone, all those kind of far-reaching things to come through, which is
Well,
actually makes the message hit home when it's character driven, I think.
I mean, this is true. This is true. Although, I think I think it's worthwhile saying that that it's both a strength and a weakness of Cameron's, therefore, in his storytelling, to have a big story, little story, and to have those things connected by, I suppose, a sort of nostalgia, or uh, a sort of rooting for the underdog in every case. Now, obviously, there's a big theme of that in Avatar coming,
Well,
but
that's what I was, yeah.
but in Titanic, one of the things that did not happen was that people were not actually not allowed to leave third class until first and second class had been cleared. So he does portray in that movie a very cold and callous crew who are locking the gates and saying, go around to the main staircase. You can't come up through here. But and that has the effect of giving you a sense of that class divide. It reinforces the fact that this is a very clearly structured society that's being subjected to this emergency. But it wasn't as simple as that. In so much as the third class quarters on Titanic were the best third class quarters that had ever been made. There was the bedding, the space people had, the access to luxuries like central meeting areas and spaces, water, drinking fountains, so on and so forth. It was actually really good prospect being in third class if you were of that class. But also as well, yeah, there's no evidence that actually people were physically restrained in the ship. So so I feel as though he in reinforcing a theme, in telling a sort of an underdog tale, he sometimes goes a step too far.
I
And
think as well, yeah, because what you're talking about there is he was actually representing a historical thing, wasn't he? And if you check, and the thing is, I know you obviously know a lot more about the real thing than I do,
yeah,
and like, so I'm basing my knowledge about what happened on Titanic based on that movie. And you're right that is not a historical document.
well, it's not a historical document, but and the thing is, I don't mind that. As I've said before, as we've discussed before, I'm not the sort of historian or archaeologist who needs movies to get everything right, because often real stories are quite slow
Yeah.
and quite boring, or quite, unless they're really exciting and amazing, but in which case the writers would know that. So the only reason why I'm pointing this out is just to say that I think, I mean, frankly, even in Titanic, the very fact that you have Rose having this overarching story of having the heart of the ocean necklace, and
Yeah.
and it begins and ends with this old lady, when actually the story, when what we've seen is this sort of this century defining tragedy, shows you that he's much more interested in telling you. He's a storyteller. He's a story weaver.
Yeah.
And so, if a really interesting detail can be added to it that'll just give you a sense of the themes, he's not afraid to do that. And I think that, though, is possibly a bit of a weakness
And
of
I find quite often with him, he falls so close to the line with cheesy,
yeah.
but manages not to cross it. So you don't kind of go, oh, you're kind of in it, but
Mm.
it could, even with the, like, so I think he called it really close when he did Terminator 2
Hmm.
as well, which is, you're talking about the funny bits, but I think they are fourth wall breaking.
Well, I
And
mean, certainly. Well, so go on,
the
go on.
the the sunglasses bit particularly, which became defining for that film and was subsequently copied
Yeah.
in multiple sequels, but that worked so well in that
Hmm.
movie. But it's naughty in the sense of like he broke the fourth wall, and I think in that sense, like he manages to do
Well,
things
and
like
so
that.
can we just explore that just for a second? So what you mean is in the first film, the Model 101 Terminator that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger wears sunglasses in order to hide the fact
Disguise
that
his
his eye is
eye.
injured. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the second film, he's getting on a bike, notices sunglasses in his jacket pocket, and puts them
Mm-hmm.
on. When a
Yeah.
completely different Model 101 would have no reason to put them
Yeah.
on. Yeah, yeah,
And basically, it's this thing going, he's going to look cool.
yeah.
And
Well,
the
and he's
audience
going to
know,
look like the first movie, and
yeah,
we know this guy, even though he's a different model.
yeah.
Yeah,
But that's technically breaking the fourth wall because
yeah,
that's not an in character piece. That's a for the audience piece.
yeah.
And like, it's subtle. It's not overtly breaking the fourth wall, but I kind of loved it. I was like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
and bought into that immediately. But now every movie they break the fourth wall and it becomes a little bit like cheesy. But when Cameron did it, like although it was like, because I think he had to argue with the people,
Mm-hmm.
the editors about leaving it in. And he argued that it should be left in, and it's a brilliant scene, but it is breaking the fourth wall. It's naughty storytelling, and I think he isn't averse to doing that. But I think that he does these little things so close to the line of overstepping the mark,
Mm.
but manages to keep it within what stops it being, unenjoyable for the audience.
Yeah, and I suppose if you were to take a moment and compare him to Steven Spielberg, I feel as though Spielberg's naughtiness is nostalgia,
Yes.
and that's his cheese, um, and Cameron's naughtiness is it's actually I would say it's human moments. That's his
Yeah.
naughtiness. So humanizing the Terminator by having him put sunglasses on when there's no reason for the second one to do that.
No, but
Or
you've got to like him, haven't you? Because you've
yeah,
got to then turn him around to be the savior. So there is a reason in film to do it,
no, I know.
but he
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have to do it by breaking the fourth wall and going,
no,
"Oh my god, you're so cool."
yeah, yeah. But that's yeah. Maybe it's human. It's humanizing characters, but also maybe it's a little bit of maybe Cameron is a little bit his own audience as well.
Yeah,
Maybe he's kind of going, do you know what would be really cool? And
yeah,
and then yeah, maybe that's it. I don't think Spielberg is quite like that. I think Spielberg has a bit
no,
more. He's cinema cheese and nostalgia, isn't he? He's got
yeah.
like, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so
That
he's
brings us on to Avatar.
yeah, and so he'd been working on this Avatar project for a long time before it was released in 2009.
And I think one of his goals was that the 3D cinema had come out, hadn't it?
Hmm,
And I think he made this comment, and quite rightly so, that there wasn't really any film that had, and I still don't think there has been a film that relies on that, is integral to that, except maybe there was a Doctor Who episode that they put in the cinema in 3D.
okay, yeah. No, I see what you
And
mean.
that was
Yeah,
actually part of the story, like it went from 2D to 3D,
yeah.
and that was part of the thing. But I mean,
I quite like the use of because they used specifically the same camera technology in Tron Legacy,
okay,
where what would happen is in the real world the film was two dimensional, and when he went into the machine world into the computer game it became 3D. You put your glasses on and it was a different experience. That was quite cool, but that was
yeah,
post Avatar.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't think 3D has been like made essential to the movie. I
Mm,
think you can watch any film that was filmed with 3D elements in 2D,
mm-hmm.
and it's what it is. Like, I don't think watching it at home on your television that's not capable of 3D takes anything particularly away from it. And I would even go so far as to say that with Avatar, like, I never watched Avatar in the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
I did watch Avatar 2 in the cinema, and I can say, like, I can agree that it was probably beautiful to watch Avatar in the cinema in 3D. But I mean, having watched the second one in 3D, I'm kind of like, I could have watched it in 2D. It would have just been as beautiful.
No, yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, I did see the first one in 3D in the cinema, and it was a there are certain moments, especially when nighttime first falls in that film, and you're
Mm-hmm.
getting the iridescence, the bioluminescence. Sorry, um, that there are moments which were very, very magical in 3D in that first one.
Oh no, I'm not
Definitely.
saying they wouldn't have been, but what I'm saying is that isn't integral to the film. Like,
Well,
you can watch it in 2D,
it's
still
not. Well,
recognize that as magical.
yeah.
And yeah, maybe it's not quite as magical,
No,
but you know, it's still magical. And
yeah. It's not. It's not. It's not.
I can see your face. You're
No,
like, stop talking. What are you talking about?
no, that's not what I'm saying. No, what I'm saying is that, or what I want to say is that, unfortunately, though, for him, it is integral. But also as well, there were definitely some bloody awful examples of post production 3D being forced on a film. So me and the wonderful Mrs. Soup, we went to see uh, Alice in Wonderland 2, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland 2. No, I know first one, sorry, in the cinema, which was a retrograde 3D, and that was terrible. They were just forcing it, and it didn't
Mm.
work. Whereas I think the art of the 3D was integral to making Avatar for Cameron.
But well, I think it was for Cameron, but I don't think it was for the audience.
Well, you say that, but there were people famously, infamously, who were coming away from the first movie with a sort of form of depression. A sort of apparently there was a post Pandoral downer for some people because they wanted to be enveloped in that film so much. Now I can see your face now, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. But
Well, you know, good for them. Like, you know, good for them. But I still don't. I think you can watch Avatar in 2D and it's fine.
yeah, it is. Though, it absolutely is fine. It is fine.
So therefore, it is not integral to the movie.
Well, except that for in both of these, you see, it's interesting. We've started talking about Avatar, and we're talking about the technology. I think that has been the underpinning since 19 was it 96, 97, when he first announced that he was going to make this. Apparently, he first wrote Avatar in 1994. And then post Titanic, he said, right, I'm going to make a film where we're going to have computer generated characters. At that point, he wasn't talking about 3D. And then along came 3D technology, and he developed a whole new camera rig to make the movie. And that became one of the underpinning factors on actually part of the sale element for these films was the pitch was we're reinventing cinema.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The first thing we talk about, the first thing everyone writes about, is the technological experience and the technological development. So in the second film, it was developing a camera rig that would work, an IMAX 3D camera rig that would work underwater, for example.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, the technology with this film and the filming and the visuals are what make it great. The story is good, not excellent.
Hmm.
It's not a particularly original story.
Hmm.
The characters in it are not particularly developed, I would say. I mean, you have quintessential, like, almost laughable bad guys
Hmm. Hmm.
who have no redeeming features really, and so that in that sense it's not kind of complex in story or character at all, and I think that that's a move away from work that he's done before where you have complex conflicted people, and you've got these kind of you know almost in your face. So we've got like a disabled person who's a twin who's getting an opportunity to get legs again
Hmm.
in in an Avatar scenario. You've got a doctor who really cares about the forest. That's pretty much all she does. And the bad guys are like, we want this unobtainium. And this is where I'm like, he crossed the line into cheesy with that one. Unobtainium. Like, I would say in the past, he has not crossed that line, but that name of that substance
Mm-hmm.
is the line cross. And like I do love some of the characters, but the main one for me is she's called Neferi, the love interest.
I think it's Nateri.
Natiri. But so I love her.
Mm-hmm.
She's complex and she almost carries the movie
Yeah.
because she draws you into this world. And then I do actually love the relationship that she and Jake have. And there's this particular
Magic.
scene, Jake, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's this particular scene where the two of them have obviously been on a little flying trip together, and they're sitting down on a rock afterwards and they're like re-going over it
Yeah.
um in kind of broken language because they're not very good at communicating with each other.
But it's
But
almost like
that bit,
children who are sort of playing with model aeroplanes, isn't it?
yeah, but
Yeah.
also, I mean, I remember doing that with people that I loved, whether it be romantic or not. But you have this kind of thing where you're like, oh my god, this was the best day ever. We did this, we did this. Oh my god, when you did this, it was so funny. Blah blah blah. And
Mm-hmm.
and that to me, that tiny little scene spoke so much volumes about their relationship. That scene made me go, I'm in it. I want them to be together. I want them to succeed. This is amazing. But a lot of it falls flat. It, and this is the problem I have. I feel like the technology, the visuals, the innovation he's made behind the camera
Mm-hmm.
are there on the screen, but they are not there in the story, the characters. They
Mm.
are, and it's not that I wasn't invested in them, because I was, because he's a good storyteller, but he hasn't brought that same level of innovation and uniqueness and passion to the people that he's created as he has to the world, the scenery, the video capturing, the 3D, all of that stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. And that's understandable. I mean, for me, the film initially, I saw it and I loved it. I had a wonderful experience in the cinema. Then I got a bit put off by all of the media talk about how yeah, this sort of people are getting depressed because they can't live on Pandora and so on. So I was like, oh, whatever.
Well, exactly.
Then I watched it a second time. I got it on DVD initially. Watched it a second time, just on a relatively small screen, and I thought, and I was seeing some of those weaknesses, some of those slightly thin story elements, the relatively simple good guys and bad guys. For me, the biggest letdown was the fact that actually this was not, given how wonderful Cameron had been, for example, in Aliens, which for me is probably his best movie. How wonderful he had been in creating that team, and we talked in previous episodes about. Well, so you've talked to me in the context of previous episodes about how one of the best things about Aliens is the little character moments that he gives all of the different members of the team that gives them
Yeah.
identity. And also similar as well, we've talked about in Predator, how actually this is important for building up what a group is and how they're going to work together. So these sort of army squad type films, there's like a hint of that at the beginning, and you sort of think, oh, cool, yeah, Cameron knows how to do this. He knows how to do military industrial complex. He knows how to do off-world, pod living. Building a sort of a contained environment on a hostile planet. And then it all just feels a bit like deploying action men or deploying sort of GI Joe
Yeah.
bases and stuff like that. It was because he was most interested, and this is I've come to understand, he wasn't interested in doing that. He wasn't interested in telling us how exactly how this human environment works that they've made, or how exactly the the military, the contractors, the governments of Earth, and human society work together yet. Apparently, we may well be coming
But
back to
that's
that.
again, that's coming back to my thing of like, stop giving us future stuff because
Yeah,
it doesn't exist yet. Give it to us
yeah,
now.
yeah. Well, that's
If
the
it's worthy of a storytelling, tell the story.
well, and that's the thing because I mean, apparently we're going to be going off world and back towards Earth in later Avatar movies. Um, so there's a hint of that, and the fact that there wasn't much to it felt insubstantial. It felt like I'd been given a cracker instead of a nice
Well, no, but that
sandwich.
again, he's teasing of better things, and I'm like, this is a pattern that he seems to be getting into,
Yeah,
in the sense of like, okay, this is what I've done now. It's going to get better, and I'm
they're
like,
pitches, they're pitches, they're business
yeah,
pitches. Yeah,
and it's like, don't spend billions of dollars
yeah,
giving me a pitch for something to come later.
yeah,
You know, George Lucas filmed Star Wars 4 first
yeah. Well, that's true.
because it was the best part of the story.
Yeah,
Like, you're always told when you're writing, start in the action. Don't have this massive lead up because people just get bored. And I think the thing is, this all might be premise. It all might be like building up to something amazing. But I'm kind of like, why don't you just do the amazing and not give us something where you're basically preempting our dislike
yeah,
by saying there's better to come.
yeah, yeah. Don't
I
worry,
can
there's
do
something.
better.
And again,
Yeah.
yeah, and as you say, this is something that we saw in the build up to Terminator, bit Dark Fate. It's something that we see elsewhere with him as well. But I've come to understand because a couple of years ago now, just before or just maybe in the first COVID lockdown, I went out and got the Blu-ray, the director's cut of Avatar, and obviously visually a bit sharper, audio probably slightly better as well. Uh, Watching it on a slightly bigger screen, we had a slightly bigger TV now, and I found myself understanding that for him, that was not the focus. The focus was this broader tale of interconnectivity of life, and and in that sense, I can't help but admire the fact that he's. I mean, so at the moment, if you bring up the current list of highest earning movies, Avatar: Way of Water is still in the box office, and it's at number 9 of all
Yeah.
time. It's outdone Top Gun Maverick, which was released this year as well, and no, sorry, last year as well,
Which was a
and
damn good movie.
damn good movie, and also being praised to high heaven.
Mm.
Avatar: Way of Water looks as though it may well break into the top five.
And I bet 3 of the top 5 are James Cameron.
Well, at the moment, Avatar number one is number one, almost $3 billion worldwide in total, followed by Avengers Endgame, then Titanic, uh, and then it's Star Wars, Avengers, Spider-Man, Jurassic World. So I mean,
Okay.
so
He's
it's
got 2 in the top.
two in the top three.
Oh, I've I've
Um,
I've maligned his name.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, two in the top three. That's pretty darn good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So so in that sense, I have to admire the fact that he's telling these stories about our world, about our environment, about our need to care for nature in a way that brings in the bucks on an international scale, and tells these gobsmackingly beautiful visual panoramas, or so he presents them to us. Um, and in that sense, it's almost well, it's not even by the back door. It's broad stroke environmentalism, and
But
I
that's
and I
fine.
kind of have to admire that. I mean, and the problem is, that wasn't something that he was looking to do with Aliens. It wasn't something he was even looking to do with The Abyss. Um, he was interested in
No,
different
but
things.
no, I understand that. But in the Titanic, he was telling the story of the Titanic, and he managed to make it relevant by making us invest in 2 characters.
Yeah, yeah,
And what he did there was he had a strong central character-based story, and then you have this backdrop. Now, what you're saying is that this backdrop in this case is environmentalism, um, you know, stop cutting down trees, protect nature. And all of that is the big Titanic
Mm.
backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
And what he needs to carry to get people to invest
Yeah.
emotionally in that world and buy into that message is a strong, strong story. And I feel a little bit like maybe this was his intention, but I feel a little bit like it's like reading a child's story, like a children's book, in the sense of like it's beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
but this person is the evil person, this person is the good person, and there's no kind of showing that they're like that these people are in love. It's just they are in love, they
Mm.
want this to happen, these
Mm.
people want this to happen. And I think so in that sense, I mean, it's not a bad story. It isn't a bad story. it's
Mm.
it's a simple, uncomplex story.
Mm-hmm.
um but it's not carrying the expertise and vision and beauty. It's not on a par really with the other things in the background. And I think I would feel like if it had been like a
So
U
yeah.
rating, like
Mm-hmm.
universally rated,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind as much.
Mm.
Like, because I wouldn't be expecting a sophisticated character driven story in something that was meant to incorporate young children.
So are you saying this is kind of like what for you at times, kind of like watching a nativity play that's played out with laser effects, pyrotechnics, and smoke and smoke
Yeah,
machines?
yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, and I'm not saying the story's terrible because it isn't. I mean, I watched Fern Gully.
Mm-hmm.
I love Fern Gully. I've watched Pocahontas.
Dances with Wolves.
I
That's the
love
other
that,
one.
but I enjoyed it. Yeah, Dances with Wolves, and it's and that's an amazing movie. But so it's not a bad story. It's not an innovative story. It's not a new story. It's 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 a good sound story, but it isn't up there with the rest. It's not inventing a new IMAX camera that can film
Underwater.
well underwater, or just that can do this special thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my question is, why would you spend so much time perfecting all the other elements
Mm-hmm.
of the movie and just make it that special at the cinema, whereas if you made it character driven, you could make it, well, not that it isn't character driven, but if he had upped the ante on telling that story rather than being pretty,
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd have made that a movie that you could watch at home in 2D that you would have adored. And I think it's because it doesn't have that element, that it relied so much on the wow factor,
Mm.
that people then criticize it because the weaknesses within it are more prevalent when you're not wowed by the visuals.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yes, I agree. I mean, undoubtedly, it's a
And
simple.
having said all of that, I do quite like it.
No, but that's the thing.
I
That's
know,
the
I'm just sitting there going, they're really negative. I'm just listening to myself being, you're being
no. But
very
what
negative,
I
and
mean that.
yet you do quite enjoy watching the film.
Yeah. Well, that's what's kind of amusing to me. I mean, if people are tuning into this episode, I don't know what on earth we're going to call it, but we've laid out Cameron's our love for him. We've definitely pointed at his weaknesses, and in this instance, what we seem to be struggling to get over may actually be ourselves. I think that's the problem. Is that it's the
No, I'm
audience.
blaming him. I absolutely am blaming him. He could do better. He has done better. And
um,
when you can sit there and get so excited about the technical aspects of it,
yeah,
you know, he could have made us fall in love with those characters a little bit more because we know he's got the skills to do that.
yeah, he could have. And I mean, have you seen the director's cut of Avatar?
No, actually,
No.
maybe I should watch that.
Okay, because there was a little bit more in there, especially at the beginning of the film. Sort of
Yeah.
a little, not much, a little bit more, giving you a little bit more about Jake Sully. But is this again? Is this us and the audience at the time, especially in 2009, the people who were long time? Because the thing is, most people adored this movie. Some Jim Cameron fans went, "Oh, it's not as good as his other stuff," and I'm not saying that most people are always right. Of course, most people aren't always right. But
Mm-hmm.
I do feel as though, in this instance, we are getting in the way. The story he wanted to tell, and he wants to tell, is actually arguably about. I mean, you say it's the Titanic element of the plot as opposed to the lovers' human element. But he wanted to possibly remind us all that we are in fact ourselves on a planet that we're intimately connected to. He shows this connection in a physical way in Avatar by having, that bioluminescence, by having literally creatures be able to, plug into each other essentially with these little squid appendages. Um, uh, but but in that sense, it has to be childlike in order to get this very fundamental, I suppose, a question or challenge across to the audience. In that sense,
Yeah, but again, I think that's a
well, hang on.
marketing thing.
Well, in that sense, though, I think it's a little bit like what we were talking about off camera a couple of days ago with David Attenborough. He's got to a point where he just doesn't give a fuck anymore. He's old enough that people aren't going to tell him to shut up. Like, he's respected enough that he knows he has a platform and a voice. And now he's just saying, we need to change how we're living on this planet. Otherwise, we're doomed. Or at the very least, the current version of humanity and our society cannot continue. Um, so that's one way of doing it, is just to not give a fuck. But I think Cameron's way of doing it has been to tell, to ease people in without even knowing, really, into a story that makes them possibly think on some level about their relationship to their planet. And I think that's
Well,
interesting.
no, it is interesting, and I applaud him for doing that because I
Hmm.
think that it's a worthwhile message.
Hmm.
But I'm what I'm trying to say is I think it would have had more power if there had been more investment in the characters, because when there's peril and you care about the characters and you care about the world and you care about the fact that they're um gonna, that way of life is going to be in jeopardy,
Hmm.
that I think would have created more of an emotional impact within the audience and would have delivered that message more powerfully, which is what I've been trying to say. I clearly haven't said that, but that's why there is my criticism, because I think the overall and the overarching message is one that we all as human beings need to get on board with.
Hmm.
Like, I really do think that. I guess that makes me an environmentalist, but whatever. And that is something that, I mean, protecting the planet is something that I feel strongly about,
Hmm.
genuinely, to the point of like I try and avoid hearing stuff and because it just genuinely emotionally upsets me. And so I'm not anti his message. I think his message is one that is good. I think I like the way that he did it. I just think it would have potentially been more powerful. And I think if we move on to
Rather than restating that, shall we flip it on its head and say, oh, no, sorry, or can I ask you, what didn't you connect with them? Which characters did you find lacking? What did you find yourself not, in your words, not caring about?
so I think it's the bit where the the sky people are just going for the tree,
Hmm.
and I just got this sense of like they're not there was it's because there was a fundamental lack of understanding in the, no, what did we just
In the
say,
Navi.
in the Na'vi
Hmm.
about the level of power against them.
Hmm.
And it was just kind of this kind of bad guy attacking good
So
people.
it ended up looking cruel then, as opposed to
it well it,
complex.
it yeah, it was just very, and also it's like I did care, but it was also this sense of impending doom, and in that sense it was like there wasn't any real peril, like, because the peril was not really peril, it was inevitable from the get-go, and so I wasn't like emotionally invested in them.
I suppose another way. I think I know what you're getting at. and maybe for me that's expressed in, because you talked about bad guys who are just obviously bad guys, but also not particularly formidable. So you have your CEO character who has this little bit of unobtainium floating on his desk and goes, "See this? This is the reason why we're here. This is the whole shebang. This pays for your science. It pays for us. You know, blah blah blah. We're gonna get this." And from that moment on, you have the sense that there's this man who's very comfortable in his office somewhere,
Yeah.
who is going to get the thing that he wants.
Yeah, and but that's what I'm. Yeah,
But
sorry.
therefore, sorry, but therefore, though, not only is there a technological mismatch, in so much as you have this massive boot coming in to stomp on the tree and stomp on where the Na'vi are living, but also as well, there's no possibility of the Na'vi having a fair confrontation or even a consultation with
Hmm.
these people, with this management structure, with this corporation, because there's a numbness there, isn't there? I suppose there's a
But
lack
there's
of.
also there's yeah, but there's and the thing that annoys me about that is like I am not saying that those characters wouldn't have just made the decision to stomp on those people, that the money and the wealth
Hmm.
was the biggest factor in their life. But I think it would have made it more interesting and a little bit, if they'd had some sort of sense of guilt around destroying a
or
people.
or maybe a little bit like real life humanity, if there were actual green protesters,
Yeah,
around, as opposed to just a small ragtag bunch of people who have been turned by the natives, in to use that sort of
yeah.
language. Yeah.
And it's sort of and that's the bit that I find the most challenging is there is no question because I think like there's I don't even think there's any pressure on them to consider, like there's no real pressure, like they're just kind of giving this heed to this scientific group, isn't it? There's no qualms in them at all that these people are just in the way and they need to destroy them, and I don't think that that's the best interpretation of what actually happens by like and I
So
also think
so
it would have been more
so just so.
interesting
Mm-hmm.
if you'd had them kind of uh, arguing with themselves or justifying
Mm-hmm.
why it was okay, not just from a money point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if they because this is the other thing that really happened is that these people would have been dehumanized
Yes.
in the sense of like they're not people,
Mm-hmm.
they're animals,
Yeah.
they don't have the same, it's like killing buffalo.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that would have meant that it had justified it in their brain
Mm-hmm.
that that's a real thing that people do to justify and make inhuman acts tolerable to themselves.
Well, this reminds me a little bit of 28 Weeks Later. It came out 2 years before the first Avatar movie in 2007. And that was also a movie that had undertones of what was happening at the time, i.e., a military power setting up a green zone in a hostile environment, and looking to quell the rest of that environment in some way, i.e., the Iraq War, the invasion of Iraq and also Afghanistan that was ongoing at the time. That undoubtedly, I think, played partly into this portrayal of how the people were going about doing stuff. Because also at the same time, you have this sort of sense that uh, that yeah, it's dehumanizing, but in order to sort of keep people safe, you have is it Quattro? The No, it's not Quattro. The big Quaritch, Stephen Lang's character, saying, my job is to protect you here on Pandora. I will not succeed. It's this sort of like sense of you've got to be suspicious and vicious and keep things locked down and stay frosty in order to survive on this hostile planet. They'd set
Yeah,
themselves up in a adversarial way, which in many ways becomes what they consider to be the only way that they can stay alive. Which again, I'm sure was connected to how people were talking about what the US and, for example, the UK and others were doing in the Middle East at the time. But again, can you? I can absolutely see why the moment you start to add that sort of complexity to the story, it becomes Star Trek. If that's what I mean, I think there's a risk there.
Mm,
There's a risk, but I do
but
also
then that
agree.
come
Sorry,
sorry.
but I do also agree that there is this sense of there being two major sock puppets, and one going, "I don't like you," and the other one going, "Oh, but we're very likable." Yeah, you know, and that's so. I think there must have been a middle ground that he didn't quite find. I
Well,
guess.
no, I think maybe marketing would have changed my expectations actually, because if it had been marketed as suitable for young children,
Hmm.
I would not have objected to the simplicity of the story
No, no.
because it would have been, you know,
I mean, in that sense, Fern Gully has just as traumatic and scenes happening in it.
well,
Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
does.
Hmm.
And the fact that you are watching it not expecting complexity, an adult story, if you
Hmm.
will,
Hmm.
you want, and you want clearly defined good guys and bad guys,
Hmm.
I think makes it um better,
Hmm.
because you are not expecting a grown-up movie. And I think that's possibly what you've got a childlike, and maybe that's the point, a wistful childlike, almost fairy tale sort of story,
Hmm. Hmm.
haven't you, set
Yeah.
against encompassing some of the most leading technology which James Cameron just pulls out of his arse.
And again, I think that's because he's had such a specific career trajectory.
Mm,
I mean, he even didn't he even consult on the look of, speaking of Predator, of the look of the monster in Predator, with Stan
I
Winston.
don't know.
He suggested it should have mandibles, for example. So, he pulls ideas out of nowhere, and
Yeah,
I think you told me that on the Prey episode.
did
Exactly.
I?
Yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah.
Well, did I know that and forget? I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Um, I'm sure you do. I think at any given time you draw on the facts that are most pertinent, and in this instance,
Yeah,
it's how Jim has slightly dropped the ball with Avatar. But with The Way of Water, we went to see it very soon after it was released. We went to see it in an IMAX 3D presentation at our local
yeah.
cinema.
And I'm
Um,
actually glad that
yeah.
we paid the money to do that,
Hmm.
because I did very much enjoy it in 3D.
Okay.
I
With
did.
Yeah.
I don't think it was essential for the story, again,
No.
but
No.
it was very beautiful, and it was honestly like a treat for the eyes just to sit back and see the, like it is just very beautiful, isn't it? The world is beautiful. It was just very nice. Yeah.
Well, it was nice, but it was an expansion of the world. So this was hinted at in the first Avatar, where they did go to tribes in different places. They went to the people, the seas of the east and the plains and so on and so forth, for the big battle at the end. Um, and in this instance, they have to sort of contrive a way of getting Jake Sully and his family out to the ocean. And
Yeah, I have a couple of complaints about the
you have
beginning of this
complaints.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I
Yep.
do. So I, we left Jake and
Jake
Nef, and what's she called? Keep forgetting her name. Nefari.
Nateri.
Natiri. Why do I keep calling her Nefari? Anyway, Natiri. We leave them together, coupled up, lovely, happy, blah blah blah. And then you get to the beginning of this movie, and spoiler alert, don't listen anymore if you want to be surprised. You get this like exposition that is in your face. It's like they had 3 children, and Grace's avatar had a baby, and blah blah blah. And this is now the Sully family.
Yeah.
Sully's stick together. Yeah. And then it started telling a story. And I'm sorry, but if you knew one of the children was going to die, you would pick the oldest son, because he has no character development. He's like the red suit wearing Star Trek characters, isn't he? He's like, I am a good son. I
Yeah.
do things properly. I
Yeah.
obey my father.
Yeah.
And then he dies, and you're like, yeah, because we're invested in the naughty son who keeps getting into trouble, who's got a good heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
and the little girl's too young, and Grace is whatever Grace is. What's she called? That girl that was Grace's kid is just amazing.
She is amazing, and actually, it is quite funny seeing Sigourney Weaver playing. It's Kiri Sully,
Kiri,
Kiri.
yeah, I
Um,
loved Kiri.
yeah,
She
and
was
seeing her play
so
a kid.
wistful and
Yeah,
dreamy.
yeah, which is
And it
it's
was like Sigourney's face, but aged back like 45 years.
yeah,
She was just like,
and blue.
and her voice and blue, yeah. But loved her character. I kind of foresee her character being something more. Again, it's like going, here's a
Oh,
taster,
yeah.
have a morsel of interest.
Now, yes. Okay. So your complaint is again relatively simple writing. Um,
Yes,
yes,
unfortunately.
which is fair
Because then,
enough.
and also, it was quite a contrived thing because they decide they're going to run, don't they?
Yeah.
And then when they get the opportunity to run again, they're like, "No, we have made our home here." And it's like, "Well, you made your home in the last place as well, and you ran, so that
but
doesn't
no, but
quite
no,
work."
no, no, no. We've now made our home in the water, where it's much
Yes,
more technologically interesting to
and
film.
we are not built to survive in the water effectively, so we have more struggles here.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That bit just really didn't, that felt very contrived to me.
Well,
But those are, and
yeah.
those are my biggest complaints about the story, because if you put those bits aside,
Yeah.
then actually it was a decent story.
Well, actually, if you put those bits, but I mean, actually, no, not necessarily. Sorry, this my complaint was the Quaritch uh, clone. So having the blue guy who's got the DNA of of the evil bad guy from the first movie.
Oh yeah, that was silly as well, actually.
That really was silly.
Well, that was just because he's just a hollow bad guy. Oh,
Or
and they
was it
gave him some
Sully?
complexity.
Right.
They give him some complexity, don't they? And like
Well,
he's got a
but
son to
yes
take
and
care
no.
of
In so
now.
much as he's got the memories of this guy up until the point that he departed for that, apparently for the big flyover last battle in
Yeah.
the first film, um, and then he's got this sense of, okay, I need to sort of get revenge for that version of me. But
Because you
then
killed me,
yeah, but
even though
that
it wasn't me and I wasn't blue.
yeah, and then when he comes across his own human remains, he crushes his own skull, almost like I am surpassing you now
Well, he did
myself.
because he had an emotion that was positive. He loved his son. That was
Yeah.
a surpassing of his previous character.
Apparently, but you see, this is the thing. Again, people listening to this will be like, "Do you guys even like these movies? What's going on?" You
Yes.
know?
Yes, we do. We've
No,
just got
I
issues.
do. I very much enjoyed it. I've read, and I'm looking forward to what comes next. I think. I mean, first of all, I said to you in the cinema, didn't I? When shit is going down towards the end in the third act of a very large, yeah, the third hour of
Yeah.
of the movie, in the third act, when you have a big ship, shall we say, sinking, um, I was thinking, good God, Cameron knows how to film water
Thinking.
and how
Yeah,
to
he
film.
does.
You know, he knows how to with the Abyss, with Titanic, with Avatar: Way of Water. He just knows how to do it. Um, and and also, I would say that again, another positive is the fact that he knows how to put together a story, as simple as it may well be. There is an element of almost not noticing that 3 hours have gone by.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
moved
I would
so
say that.
smoothly, so well.
It, there was I think about three moments within the movie where I'd sort of gone, this is dragging a little bit, and then it was over, and
Yeah,
I'd thought, oh, this is, and so it certainly didn't feel like 3 hours of my life had passed.
no,
It was, in that, and as I say, it was absolutely beautiful, and there were bits I really liked. So I really liked the story of his second son and that weird sea creature. I was just like, oh my god, I love you. And it gets into this kind of theme as well, doesn't it, of this mismatched family,
mm.
in the sense that, he's from another world, he's got four fingers, there's that weird avatar baby from Grace's body.
Yeah,
um
I thought that was interesting actually. That they could tell creatures that were either avatars or had been born of avatars because they had the human four digits, and I hadn't really clocked that the Navi only have three.
No, I
Um,
hadn't really noticed that, but that
yeah,
was also the because I went back and watched Avatar after we'd watched this, and it was still that way
yeah.
in the movie, but it was in the first one, but it was much more subtly done. And I like the fact that they're kind of considered freaks. There's this difficulty in them integrating, but also in them in that kind of mixed community, they are pushing the Navi in whatever form they are forward in order to face this threat.
Mm,
And
mm.
like without those differences, they wouldn't be able to do it. And I do think as well they had the same element of unobtainium, which again it's a mulligan, isn't it? Is that what
Yeah,
it's called?
not a mulligan, a MacGuffin.
Yeah, it's a MacGuffin because it's just like something valuable that you can only get by killing big fish, you know.
Well, but also it was based in real world whaling practices.
No, it
You know,
was.
the
I get
extraction of
that,
ambergris, for example. Yeah.
but it's it doesn't really matter what that is.
Mm,
And it's just the fact that it's a wasteful process that you get something very valuable and you throw the carcass
mm.
away, wastefully. And the thing that you're extracting is just. But I did think that like the little story with him and the um
The Tulkun.
alienated, yeah,
Mm,
was a lovely little story. I really liked the second son. I thought he had a really good like heart. I thought he was very like Jake as well in the fact that he's really gung ho and just kind of um launches himself into things before thinking about it. And you get the sense that Jake would have been like that, don't you?
hmm.
And has been tempered by training.
Yeah.
Because he certainly ran into things as a kind of marine trained man originally.
Yeah,
Um,
this is true. I, 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 I mean, absolutely. I feel as though we're sort of hopping around a little bit in terms of what's going on in the film. I suppose what I would say is we're not trying to present a review or an overview of the movie. I suppose
no,
this is much more like almost like textures, I guess, that
yeah,
we're reflecting on. But just going briefly, just quickly back to the Tulkun, the sort of the whale-like creatures. Um, Again, I think this is where one of the keys to understanding Cameron's Avatar thinking, whether we agree with whether we agree that this is the best use of his tremendous creativity or not, um, is that the Tulkun uh, having such a clear and obvious um, sentience and their
yeah,
ability to. So there's a point when one of the big mothers, who eventually is hunted by the whaling ship, is talking to the queen, as it were, of the sea people, or the wife of the chief, and they're talking about each other's children and how one of them's pregnant again and how have you been and this kind of thing,
mm,
and that they're really connecting in a way that clearly Cameron sees as if only we could do that, because he
yeah,
went on to do a during production of Way of Water, of the Way of Water. He did a documentary for National Geographic, which is on Disney Plus, narrated by Sigourney Weaver, filmed by Cameron's crew, and it's following the life of, I think, different types of whales and how they interact with each other, and also talking to people who have had moments with whales and how, for example, camera crews have had moments where whales come up and offer them things. So maybe they think that someone is actually a starving whale, and they'll bring a big chunk of meat over. And when you don't eat it, because obviously it's like the size of you, they go, okay, pick it up and go off and eat it themselves. He portrays a love for these creatures and is is hoping is imploring us to come along with him on that, and to
yeah. I mean,
understand that we have something to lose here.
oh
Um,
yeah, I remembered like when the child whale baby thing was going on. That reminded me
the
of
calf, yeah.
yeah, it reminded me of have you seen the documentary Blackfish, which is about sea sea SeaWorld keeping orcas?
No, No, I haven't.
Right, so it's a really powerful documentary. I would recommend that you have a look at it. But one of the scenes in there is talking about how they get orcas so that they can then train them up.
Right.
And what they would do is they would separate the calf from the parents and capture the calf.
Yeah.
And very much was watching that bit where they captured the calf in that to get the mother, which is a slightly different thing, but I was very much thinking there's a callousness to that, and there's also within that documentary you see that these creatures are very intelligent, they have very, very tight familial bonds, and they wail, and they would produce sounds that would travel miles and miles and miles in the sea, but they're just in a tank because they've lost their family and they're like crying out to, it's just heartbreaking. So yeah, I mean, I did get this sense that that wailing bit, and for whatever reason they're doing it, was a massive commentary on how we're treating creatures in the sea, what our tolerances are for cruelty.
Yeah. And I think I have to say I think that's got to be respected. And the reason
Oh
I say,
yeah.
well, and just, I mean, just to really be clear on this, the reason I say that is that there are people still writing, we don't need Jake Sully. Jake Sully is a boring character. Why the hell is he the head, the face, as it were, of Avatar? You know, the Na'vi themselves are much more interesting, so on and so forth. There are people writing those sorts of articles.
No, well, I don't think that's true. Can I
No,
just
yeah, go on.
interject here and just say that I think there has to be a person that bridges the knowledge of humanity
Yeah,
and brings that to the Na'vi.
yeah,
So there has to be a bridge-like character, and I think and it works that it's him because he claimed, he's a warrior
yeah,
in that sense. He had this thing where he was unable to walk, he became disabled through an injury, so he was massively humbled in that regard, had things taken away from him. He's impulsive and impetuous, and and I think those are
and he's a fish out of
characteristics.
water. Ba-dum-tsh.
Yeah, yeah, but but those are the characteristics that actually within the Na'vi people are admired,
Yeah, yeah,
and so I don't think he's I mean, he's not a complicated character. He loves his family, he loves this way of life, he wants to protect it. He's gone native in inverted commas, be in that way, because and he's embraced it, and I think you have to have, and he's not embraced it like a scientist. This is the other thing I think is important. He's embraced it with his heart. He's not studying it, he's not interested in it academically. He's literally fallen in love with this woman and the way of life, and he's got his family there, and
and he's
he's
adopted it.
still,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think you need that. And I think if he was a more severe character in terms of personality wise or something, he would not have been able to infiltrate, not that that's the right word, but be accepted by that community in the way that he has been.
so are we saying that actually maybe the quite simple characters
No,
are crucial
no, we're
to this
not.
story?
No, we are not. Stop trying to put words in my mouth. Mischievous Mark.
But the point is though is that I really do feel as though these are highly entertaining, grand scale, demanding of international attention in terms of their technology and in terms of
Yeah.
how they're being marketed and how they're presented, and also what they look like. Eco warnings, and
Yeah.
and yes, personally, I would love to see another Aliens. I would love to see another Terminator. or Terminator 2.
No,
No, no, no,
I'm literally oh you mean like in grants in that scale?
no, no,
Yeah,
no, no.
no.
So I mean, in terms of the way taking us to a different world, taking us to something which has got that sort of dark edge to it, that's really cool, or that's got a bit that basically that has the same threads of intrigue that drew us into
Yeah.
Terminator, drew us into Aliens. The camaraderie, for example, of the Marines in that movie, but that's just not where he's at, and
No.
and maybe that's okay.
And the thing is well, it is okay. It is. And I mean, he's not producing bad movies, is he? You know, this
Except he is literally producing bad movies. He produced
oh,
Terminator Dark
yes.
Fate, didn't he?
He's
So
not directing bad movies. You
yeah.
know, he's directing, and this I think if you looked at this across like a list of things, like factors within a movie,
Hmm.
I would say, like, if you looked at kind of Terminator 2 or Aliens, he would spike off the chart in terms of excellence on most, if not all,
Yeah.
um aspects. So character, story, technology, science fictions, whatever they are. And
Memorability,
yeah,
icon. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I think the difference is with Avatar is he spikes off the charts even more so than normal
Hmm.
in some areas, but he's just hitting notes in other areas. Do you see what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad movie. I think if it was directed by somebody other than James Cameron,
Hmm.
it would be almost given a different status.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Which is what you're saying. Maybe it's the audience's fault because we're
Possibly.
going in with an expectation.
Or
But
maybe it's his fans' fault because we really want to see. We're really hoping for something that he's at the moment not interested in doing. He's excelling in slightly different ways,
yeah,
and it's taken me a while to accept and understand that. I think.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I genuinely am frustrated by his constant, like, genuinely frustrated by his constant thing of stick with me, it's going to get even better.
yeah.
Because that to me is just like,
Well,
just do it.
I suppose. Fine, fine.
Shia LaBeouf,
Yeah,
do
exactly.
it.
Do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Um, but okay. Well, what? Finally, then, finally, do you think that it is going to get better? Do you think that this grand project
Oh,
will?
undoubtedly. I
Yeah.
mean, you can see the threads of this starting,
Mm.
in the sense of, like, I think
Because the
something's
third one
definitely,
is 90% filmed.
yeah, but the
Yeah.
Kiri character
Mm.
is there's something going on there. I mean, I was immediately intrigued and then very upset that nothing happened apart from she got a few glowy things to follow her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that was cool. There's
Mm-hmm.
no doubt that was cool. But that girl is like AWOL personified or some shiz. And
Yeah.
like,
Because her mother passed into Awa. Yeah.
yeah.
Into the goddess
So
of the
I'm
planet.
just literally like, what is she going to do? She's amazing.
Yeah.
But not yet. And I'm just like, it's like, I feel a little bit with her like he's forcing us to witness the childhood of Jesus rather than the good bit of the story. Said as an atheist,
Yeah.
by the way. But like, nobody cares what Jesus did when he was 2. Like, did he run in? Did he kick his mum in the shin and go ha 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 and run away?
Well, do you
Nobody
know, actually,
cares.
this is slightly off topic, but there are Coptic gospels that talk about his childhood, where
Yeah, of
apparently he
course there
turned a
are.
bunch of kids into chickens because they pissed him off one day. But
That
then,
sounds like not. Yeah, that's a reason why that's not considered canon.
yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly. That's not a sinless life. Um, but though I do love the idea of someone going, but I'm, yeah, exactly, but I'm interstellar Jesus, Kiri says, yeah.
Yeah.
um, okay, well, I suppose as we draw to a close here, is there any sense of what our next episode might be about?
Yes, I think we're going to go back several years in time and talk about The Elder Scrolls V,
Skyrim.
Skyrim.
Ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da,
Which
da-da-da,
I
da-da-da,
might,
da-da-da,
you know, they say,
da-da-da. Yep. So,
you know, they say you have to do
oh,
10,000 hours of something
yep,
before you're an expert.
yep.
I think I have achieved this.
Yeah, yeah. I've got 200 and something hours in that game.
Oh no, I'm definitely in the thousands. I'm not even joking. I've played that game through so many times.
Okay.
And I've just recently found, like, I don't know how I didn't know this, but I've just recently downloaded the Adventurers Pack DLC.
Hmm.
So I decided I was going to start again from scratch. And within about a week, I'm now level 43.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay.
I'm causing some ripples across Tamriel.
You are. Okay, fair enough. But there you go. 2 Dragonborns will be coming at you in the next episode with regards to Skyrim.
Yay. Okay. The multiverse calls the diner back to its swirling depths. The warm conversation and cosmic mystery must depart for now. We will materialize again somewhere new in time and space. But for now, it's goodbye from the Else Realm
Realm
Diner.
Diner!
Else Realm Diner.
More than anything else in her life, she wants to see Paris.